Bem, bom dia a todos. Eu vou falar as primeiras palavras em português, depois eu vou passar para o idioma inglês, mas eu lembro a todos que nós temos a tradução disponível do inglês para o português, do português para o inglês, para aqueles que desejarem a tradução. Eu vejo aqui várias pessoas muito importantes do ramo da educação que nos acompanham sempre. E lembro que este seminário é mais uma das iniciativas da nossa Escola de Pós-Graduação em Economia, no sentido de debater publicamente alguns assuntos que são muito importantes, não apenas para o país e para o Estado, mas também para a comunidade, para a família e para cada um individualmente. Eu vou agora passar para o idioma inglês, como a gente sempre faz quando tem aqui alguns convidados internacionais. So, good morning, you all. It's a great pleasure and a great honor to have you all here. This is one more of the initiatives of this school in order to enhance the debate, the public debate, the open debate about important questions of our country, of our state, of our community, of our families, and of ourselves as well. Let me remind you all that this seminar is being streamed through the web to Brazil as a whole, actually to the world as a whole, because everybody can access, but people have had the communication of the links all over Brazil through our communication agency. So, and moreover, we are going to record all the sessions and they are going to be available in the web as of 3 or 4 days from now. The links to these sessions are going to be in our website, and the website of the EPGE. So all of you be aware of that. We read every day in the newspapers about a very high income class in Brazil asking and demanding from the government subsidized credit and, for instance, protection from foreign production. Well, it's typical that people make their demands. On the other extreme of the distribution, you see a very low income class demanding social protection, demanding free public services, and demanding income transfers from the society. That's also very usual. It's not a particularity of Brazil. It happens in several countries. But you also see in Brazil the middle of the distribution, the average class, demanding very favorable retirement plans, very favorable pension plans, sometimes a protected labor market, and last but not least, free public tertiary education for their, or should I say, for our children. It's also no particularity of Brazil to have that, but the problem is that sometimes it amounts to over 104% of GDP. We have to bring this extra 4% from abroad, put in goods and services here, which represent something like $80 billion or $90 billion per year. The big question about all these demands is also that the trade-off between putting one additional real in investment in infrastructure and capital goods, so favoring growth, and the alternative option of putting this R$1, allocating this R$1, one marginal, one extra real, to favoring rescuing people from poverty or decreasing income inequality, this trade-off is posed very firstly. And all these things are common to several countries. I would say that one particularity of Brazil, maybe the only so far, from everything I have said, is that we seem not to be ready right now to sit at the table, different actors, and making the concessions which are needed for somehow reaching a consensus. And what does education has to do with all that? Because it's about education that we are going to talk today. Well, education has to do with that because education is the most important between all the policies that we know, which shares the ability to deal at the same time with growth and with rescuing people from poverty and decreasing income inequality. So it's a conciliatory policy. It's a policy through which we may achieve both ends at the same time. You do not need to devise this one marginal real from the public budget, either to growth infrastructure or to rescuing people from poverty, if you employ it in education, because education allows you to, at the same time, increase in human capital. And when we talk about the tertiary sector, of course, this is going of utmost importance because we went to departure from a Fordist line of production to a line of production with high value added. And you're also going to provide the skills for the poor and for those who are not well endowed by financial means to be rescued from very bad conditions of life. So this is our main purpose here, is studying and raising some questions which are going to be very useful for the society. So let me introduce you to the members of our table. We are very happy to have 4 distinguished professors from abroad, from the University of Bath, to share their time with us, their knowledge with us, their research with us. And we are going to have their contribution to our seminar through the whole day. So I'm giving a special distinction to this visit because they have come from, I would say, very far away to be here with us, and we are really very delighted to have them with us here today. So I would like to invite to the table with no necessary order, but just following the names from the left to the right, from the perspective of the public, Mr. Jan Tonks. Please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Jan Tonks. So, if I can see well from the left to the right, we also have the presence here of the Vice President of the UNDIFES, which congregates the public federal universities in Brazil, Professor Anísio Brasileiro Dourado, to say his welcome words to the public. Professor Lindolfo, okay. Okay, so I will not announce myself, but in the other side, on the other side of the table, we're going to have somebody who I'd like to thank so much for everything he has done for our school, for our foundation, for education in Brazil. He has been the director of the most important math center in South America, or to say Latin America, which is the IMPA, Instituto de Matemática Pura e Aplicada. And he has also been a director of our research council, CNPq, and has helped us very much as a provost of our foundation, Professor Lindolfo Carvalho. So I think we could start with Professor Lindolf saying his welcome to the public and saying some words to the public about education.
I'm very pleased to be here with you, and I think this meeting is very opportune in this moment of growing of the system of higher education in Brazil. Only to remember, Brazil has had the impressive development in this area in the last 60 years. I remember when I entered in the School of Engineering in 1950. I am very old. Brazil used to have at that time around, they told me the number I have was 60,000 students in higher education. 60,000 in 1950. And at that time, there was no program of postgraduate graduate programs going to master degree and PhD. We have some, in some schools, mainly in São Paulo, they give the degree of doctor, but only with the presentation of a thesis. There are not a course of for PhD. The first master degree, I think, was in '63 in the University of Viçosa in agronomy. And then that was started in the 60s, it started the graduate studies. But so Brazil used to, well, one point important in all these things was the creation in 1951 of two of the most important agencies. That was the National Research Council, at that time linked to the Presidency of a Republic, and the CAPES, linked to the Ministry of Education. Both were started in 1951. And I think concerning graduate studies and research, they mark a point in Brazil development. But what I haven't, today we are with around more than 6 million students in graduate undergraduate in Brazil. So a growth of more than 6 or 7 million, I don't know. A growth of more than 100 times, and the population has grown 4 times from that time. So that was developed mainly in very, very strongly with the public institution, but more with the private institutions. There's some deformations because, and with the private institutions, there is a tendency to give more attention to the areas of social sciences that are cheaper to establish. A school of engineering or medicine are very expensive. So, in the whole view of Brazilian programs, we have an excess of social science and a lack of engineering and medicine and other that are very important also to the country. But with the establishment of CNPq and CAPES in '51, they started to send systematically people to get their master degree and doctor degree in other countries, Europe and the United States. And in the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s, these people are returning. And that explains why they return and become to be important in their institutions, and that implied to start the programs of graduate studies in the 60s. Finally, in 67, the Ministry of Education established a regulation for graduate studies with some rules established by Newton Sucupira that are valid until today. So we are now with this situation with a quite a big program of undergraduate and also of graduate studies. It is interesting to remember some things. Returning to the 50s, Brazil has had a history that was not rich in terms of research and teaching from the origins. But so the first institution that has had a name of a university in Brazil was what we know by Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, that was established in 1920. Only in 1920 we have had a university. That was not quite a university, it was a cluster of independent schools. And then started to have one in 34, established an important one in São Paulo, the University of São Paulo. But in 50, north of Belo Horizonte, we used to have only two institutions with the name of universities, Recife and Bahia. There was some independent schools of agronomy or something like that in the state of Ceará, Pará, and so on, but not an organization with the name of university. That started in the end of the 50s. For example, Ceará, I think the university started in 57 or something, in the others. So after the government started a program to put at least one university in each state, that put a development in this. And the private institution flourished since then. And the graduate studies, that is important, also just developed rapidly after the 70s. And Brazil got some good nucleus in the University of São Paulo, in Brazil, in some universities here, and some independent institutions like the Brazilian Center for Physical Research, the Institute for Pure and Applied Mathematics, and others. Well, so it's now very opportune to have an overview of all this system and discuss the possibility of get it better, more efficient. Thank you.
Professor Anísio Brasileiro Dourado, vice-presidente da Andifes, por favor.
Alô. Muito bom dia a todos os presentes. Eu quero inicialmente, em nome da Associação Nacional das Universidades Federais, agradecer o convite vindo da Fundação Getúlio Vargas. Quero agradecer ao senhor e a toda a equipe da Fundação, dizer que particularmente no meu caso, eu fico muito contente de aqui estar, porque nos anos 80 eu fiz meu mestrado na PUC, aqui no Rio, e tinha sempre a oportunidade de vir para a biblioteca e era uma biblioteca excelente, certamente continua na área de ciências econômicas, e eu tinha a satisfação de sempre vir aqui na Fundação Getúlio Vargas. Vou tentar ver se volto ao 7º andar, pelo menos por alguns 10 minutos de hoje até o final do dia. Eu quero cumprimentar a representação, nossos amigos da Universidade de Bar aqui presentes, e muito brevemente, não é dizer que a Andifes, ela agrupa as 63 universidades federais do Brasil, que constituem uma das bases de sustentação do desenvolvimento do conhecimento científico no país. Não somos os únicos, há um sistema de universidades estaduais, há um sistema de universidades confessionais, particularmente as PUCs e as universidades católicas, e há instituições importantes como a Fundação Getúlio Vargas, aqui no Rio e em São Paulo, na área de economia e finanças, além de institutos de pesquisa, como o Laboratório Nacional de Computação Científica e assim por diante. O Brasil, como o professor Lindolfo bem comentou, é muito recente na área de educação superior e formação à ciência. Temos 2 grandes eixos, o Ministério da Educação, que agrupa as universidades, e a CAPES, então o professor Márcio vai comentar sobre a nossa CAPES, e o Ministério de Ciência, Tecnologia e Inovação, que agrupa basicamente o CNPq e a FINEP, que são muito importantes para o nosso sistema. As universidades federais, elas constituem-se, portanto, em instituições públicas, instituições do Estado, e tem como missão a formação de qualidade na graduação e na pós-graduação em nosso país, além do desenvolvimento de pesquisas, através da articulação com importantes empresas brasileiras, a exemplo da Petrobras, através do Centro de Pesquisas da Petrobras, e também importantes empresas privadas brasileiras e no plano internacional. Essa competência científica brasileira, ela nos faz estar em posição de destaque nos indicadores internacionais, no que diz respeito à produção científica e no que diz respeito à avaliação. Portanto, eu quero concluir falando sobre a importância da internacionalização, professor. Tão logo nós recebemos o convite, nós fizemos o possível para aqui estarmos, para demonstrar a importância que as universidades federais concedem à internacionalização. Mas o que é internacionalização? É uma expressão em voga, onde todos se dizem internacionais e todos primam pela ideia da internacionalização. Eu diria que a internacionalização é um processo que se constrói no tempo e que se articula tanto através da mobilidade estudantil, mas, sobretudo, através da mobilidade entre pesquisadores em instituições, no caso, brasileiras e internacionais, a exemplo de vossa instituição, e que tem como elemento crucial a pesquisa. Eu não acredito que se internacionaliza uma instituição sem que ela desenvolva o conhecimento científico, gere através da pesquisa, em grupo ou individual, para que o conhecimento se desenvolva e possa exatamente se intercambiar. E, portanto, nós compreendemos que temos 4 grandes desafios, dentre muitos, na conjuntura brasileira que vivemos, mas eu ressaltaria, e nossa expectativa é podermos aprender mutuamente com os senhores em torno do primeiro desafio, que diz respeito à articulação entre a educação superior e a educação básica. Nós avançamos muito, nós sabemos extrair petróleo a 6.000 metros de profundidade. Nós somos extremamente competentes em algumas áreas do sistema bancário, por exemplo. O Brasil avançou enormemente, posso citar uma dezena, mas nós temos um grande problema na educação básica, na educação média do nosso país. Se nós não trabalharmos e resolvermos essa questão, não adianta você produzir ciência na ponta do conhecimento. Então, como articular a educação superior e a educação básica? Desafio 1. O desafio 2 é a formação em línguas. Nós sabemos que temos problemas né, na formação em línguas, particularmente a língua inglesa. Então, o Ministério da Educação tem feito um esforço e uma ação intensiva para que nossos estudantes possam ter suas formações em línguas, para possibilitar que haja esse intercâmbio e esse olhar sobre culturas diversas. O terceiro ponto diz respeito à articulação entre a graduação e a pós-graduação. E eu posso falo na minha universidade, no meu departamento, na minha área de engenharia civil, nós temos imensas dificuldades, por exemplo, de inovar nas formações pedagógicas, na estrutura da graduação. É mais fácil você ir à lua do que você mudar uma estrutura curricular de uma disciplina. Então, esse é um grande desafio. Como que nós podemos utilizar a tecnologia da informação e comunicação, como que nós podemos fazer, né, professor Sandoval, o senhor tem muito a dizer sobre isso, como é que nós podemos trabalhar para que nossos estudantes, eles possam se interessar por algo que seja diferente do professor ficar 2 horas demonstrando fórmulas matemáticas e eles intercambiando-se aí a nível mundial com as mensagens e as internets. Então, ao mesmo tempo, como você passar rapidamente da graduação à pós-graduação, como ainda cursando disciplinas na graduação, você já pode cursar disciplinas da pós, de tal maneira que nós possamos abreviar, com qualidade, obviamente, o tempo de formação dos nossos estudantes. Então, nós acreditamos que temos muito a cooperar e a aprender com a Europa, e particularmente nesse exato momento em Glasgow, está havendo uma grande atividade agrupando as principais muitas universidades do mundo inteiro. O Brasil está fortemente representado pelas áreas de relações internacionais das nossas universidades e esses são temas que estão em discussão. E o último ponto, professor, eu concluo, diz respeito à articulação com o mundo das empresas. Até nós chegarmos na ideia do parque tecnológico, nós trabalharmos, aí é um duplo movimento. As universidades, acredito, tenho consciência que elas estão preparadas para trabalhar com a indústria, e a indústria, acredito que ainda tem muito a desenvolver no que diz respeito à compreensão da importância de pesquisa e desenvolvimento no seu interior. Então, essa articulação que vai na direção dos parques tecnológicos, por exemplo, é algo que é um grande desafio que se coloca para o Brasil. Não dá para nós ficarmos apenas esperando os recursos oriundos do Estado ou da União. Nós temos que ir buscar outras fontes de recursos, obviamente, dentro dos marcos legais do país e das fundações que amparam essas iniciativas, mas nós temos que ter a capacidade de empreender, a capacidade de ousar, porque os tempos são outros, completamente diferentes dos tempos que eu vivi quando entrei na universidade há mais de 30 anos. Então, são esses pontos aí que nós gostaríamos de deixar como elementos para o debate e agradecer mais uma vez o convite. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado, professor. Muito obrigado, Professor Anísio. Agora we're going to have Professor Jan Tonks from the University of Bath.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd just like to say a few words. First of all, thanking Professor Cisner and the faculty here at FGV for organising this conference and hosting the participants from the University of Bath. If I could just say just a few words about the University of Bath. Next year our university celebrates its 50th birthday, which is a relatively young university, but the School of Management, of which the participants from Bath are all members, is a relatively old business school within the UK. So I work at a young university, but in an old business school. So the university is located about 100 miles west of London, if you can picture a map of the UK in your heads. It's just outside, it's a campus university just outside the very attractive Georgian city of Bath, which is a World Heritage Site. The university has about 11,000 undergraduates and 5,000 postgraduates with students from over 100 different countries. The theme of the conference today is particularly apt for some of the research that's being undertaken at the University of Bath. We have a research centre called ICHEM, which stands for the International Centre for Higher Education Management, and this is an interdisciplinary research centre that addresses major issues confronting higher education in a global context. The UK higher education environment is one which has featured a great deal of monitoring by UK regulators over the last 25 years, both in terms of research quality and teaching quality. And one of the purposes of the conferences today is it allows us an opportunity for people from the UK to come and share their experiences of this regulation with both academics and policymakers here in Brazil. And I trust the conference will be very successful. Thank you.
I would like to just give you an outlook of what we're going to discuss here today. So we are not going even to scratch the surface of the theme of education in Brazil, but we will do our best to try to respond to some definite questions. For instance, the questions regarding the consumerist trend in education. After the revolution, which happened in the United States in the 60s, Richard Nixon started to increase the number of students in the tertiary sector, actually as a demand which was enacted in the 60s. And that has been provided to the public mostly through the use of private sources. So one interesting question that we're going to try to discuss here today and to provide an answer is how does that affect the quality of the service? The fact that you use more and more the private sector in order to attend this demand for public education. This is an important question. Another important question we're going to discuss here today has to do with comparing Brazil and China and Russia and in India. Is it true that exactly 5 years from now we are going to have the best demographic structure in Brazil? By that meaning that those who are able to produce are going to be in a peak relatively to those who are under 18 or over 70. Is that true? It looks like it is true. It looks like we have 5 years to reach this point. But it also looks like true that Russia has gone through that in 2010, and India is going through that in 2020. But China is going through that in 2050. So it's very interesting to know how the demand for education is going to evolve once we analyze these demographic structures, mostly for Brazil. We're also going to devise answers to the question of rankings, the Shanghai ranking, the Times Magazine ranking, these international ranks. Do they contribute or do they not contribute to our understanding of education in the world as a whole? We're going to try to devise answers to the question of, well, if the government tries to spend more resources in order to get better financial reports from the universities and the centers who get money from the government, will that actually improve the quality of these financial reports? Always. Or only when they are not too close to a threshold, in which case they need to use the management of accruals from one year to another. So if you are deficitary in 1 year, you just make some arrangements and you are left deficitary in that year and so on. And also a very important question has to do with the SISU, the centralized system which you use nowadays to attract people through ENEM, which is our second grade national exam, and the SISU, which is a computerized, centralized system of making allocation of students to different universities. Does that enhance geographic movements from students in the south to the north and so on? And does that lead to a higher dropout, since by making these matches you have more people enrolled, and for this reason some people were not to be enrolled in the professions that they chose because they chose strategically and not based on their on their capacity of learning and on their interests. So these are some of the questions which we're going to debate today through 6 or 7 different sessions. I thank all the members of the table, and we are going to proceed to the second table, in which Professor Jan Tonks and Marcelo Neri, who not far from today was in charge of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs in Brazil, so he has studied very much this question of education and the social impact of education. The name of the session is going to be Measuring the Social Impact of Higher Education and Research, which is also a very important theme. And we are going to have like 1 hour for that. I would like to ask Professor Anísio, who's going to moderate the session, to be concerned about the time slots and to allow time for the public to manifest its opinions. Thank you very much.